Thanks for being here. We had to go and quickly turn these cameras on because we were just going off too much about so many subjects, and we needed to get these cameras on, get these mics on, actually start talking properly on camera.
Right. Yeah, I was halfway afraid that my voice would stop working.
Yeah. We need some whiskey in here to like soothe your throat, but unfortunately we just got the water for now.
Oh yeah, it'll work. But yeah, so I mean, like we really did have a lot of. Every time we meet up, we have fascinating conversations, and I am excited for the future because what we talked about was the possibility of a lot of different, very interesting topics that we could cover. With the recorder turned on, of course.
Yeah,
that was all off mic, but here we are.
And I want us to get there, but I think I'd like to learn stuff about you that I actually don't know a ton about, which is your early life and how you got into the company you're in now, into technology, and hopefully that leads us into some of these, even more exciting areas, if that sounds good to you.
That's perfect. Let's do it.
Tell me about your way into entrepreneurship, and I think that came through sport. You've been into sport a long time, and your company is a sport company. So start from wherever you want.
Yeah. So I mean, the entrepreneurship journey, we're going to go all the way back to childhood, because my first business that I had was mowing lawns. And my dad had a push mower that he let me borrow, but I had to pay for the gas that went into it. And so I had to figure out how much gas it would take to cut a neighbor's grass, push the mower over there. And then I had to figure out what I was going to charge to mow a lawn. So I was starting to understand like some of the very most basic fundamental concepts of business, like cash flow and maintaining a positive profit margin. But that actually led me to my next venture, which was in high school selling black market cookies. So
why are they black market, man?
Because you weren't allowed to sell cookies at the school, right?
Okay.
All the food had to come through the cafeteria. But that being said, like just one of the random things about me is I have a passion for baking, and I'm very good at it. And so my cookies. Yeah, my chocolate chip cookies I would make were probably the best chocolate chip cookies that you'll ever eat. So I actually randomly ran into, I'm trying to remember this guy's name. It always slips my mind. But he was basically the guy who came up with TCP IP protocol.
Right.
Like the plumbing of the internet itself. But anyway, when I met him, I brought him some of these cookies, and he said they were the best cookies he ever had. So that's how I wanted to leave my memorable impression. But yeah, so I knew how much the ingredients cost. I would bake them. I would bring a Tupperware container, hide it in my backpack, and I was selling them for 50 cents a pop. And the teachers were buying them. And eventually, the vice principal found out. I got called up to the office, and I had to shut down my cookie operation. But yeah, I mean, there's always been that entrepreneurial bend in my mind that I love seeing problems and then trying to come up with solutions for them. Mm-hmm. And that's really what a free market is. Like, mm-hmm. You see issues that people have, and you've come up with a profitable, innovative way to solve them. And mm-hmm. Congratulations, like that's the fundamentals of business.
Yeah, I think I'm the same as you, man. And this is what happens with the conversations that me and you have. Because we don't know, we've getting to know each other more and more over the years. But every time we're like, I'm the same, or I feel the same, or I believe the same thing. I used to do counterfeit Pokemon cards.
No,
that's what I did at school, and then and I started very young as well.
So you're more of a black hat entrepreneur.
Yeah, more like when you said black market, I was like, oh, a fellow con man. No,
a fellow innovator.
Innovator, yeah. So you started school, the cookies and all that, and the lawnmowers. But then, what age were you when you started what you're doing now, or there's something else before that was important?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, a kid who loves baking and selling cookies is probably going to start to gain some weight. So when I was going through puberty, I had the nickname of Drew Carey because I had thick glasses, a buzz cut, and I was a chubby, funny guy, which is its own thing, but not the best thing when you're starting to get interested in girls and there's proms and Sadie Hawkins dances that no one is asking you to.
Yeah.
So like that wasn't good, and so like I was very uncomfortable with my body. I would get fatigued really easy, and like one thing that stands out to me is we had gone to a lake one day. To go out, like friends had a boat and people were doing like knee boarding and water skiing and stuff like that. And I was trying to knee board, but my little body was heavy and my little arms were weak. And so every time I would try to get up on the knee board, the strength to weight ratio wasn't right. And so I kept getting sucked into the water, and I would take in about a gallon of lake water. And after like multiple failed attempts to get up, I had to like haul myself like a little baby elephant seal back onto the boat, and there's this girl that I had a crush on. I'm just like, oh no, this is permanent psychological damage.
They call that growth.
Right. Yeah, it's growth, but like, that kind of plants the seeds of things that become who you are. And, like freshman year of high school, like I had a bully problem, right? So in PE class, there were like juniors that would bully me and, slap me in the back of the head with their class rings, try to stuff me in the toilet to give me swirlies and like all those kinds of things. And, I fought and I resisted as best as I could.
Yeah.
But like, it's just another one of those things where you're starting to realize there's something about the way that I'm living my life that I don't like, and it's putting me in a position to get picked on and kicked around. And there's this guy who stood up for me one day. His name was Branston Flanagan. So if he randomly listens
Sounds like a general.
Well, he ended up joining the military, and he was in Iraq.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, he was like just a physical specimen of a dude. And I remember he stood up for me one day, and it kind of shifted. I was like, I wanted to be more like him, right? Because, maybe one day I'll get to stand up for somebody else myself. So that was what really planted the idea that I wanted to change something. And so I didn't know anything about fitness. I didn't know anything about nutrition. I didn't play any sports. Like I attempted to play football in middle school, but because I had thick glasses, was short and chubby, I was just like a bad tackling dummy, and I had really bad knee tendonitis. So like it was not a good experience. But one thing that I saw was that the skinny kids ran a lot, and there was this thing called the cross country team. And so we'd be driving to school, and you'd see like this pack of skinny guys running down the road. And it's like, well, maybe if I start trying to run, I can lose weight. So one summer, this is the summer of my sophomore year going into my junior year of high school, I just tried to start running. And so I ran, like didn't even make it to the neighborhood mailboxes. So like I couldn't even run like a 15th of a mile without stopping. And so I'm like, oh, that was tough. And like I walk back home. Next day I try it again. I make it all the way to the mailboxes, walk home. Next day I run a little bit further. And every day that summer I just ran a little further, and got to where I could run a mile at a time, mile and a half, 2 miles, 2.5. My weight's starting to go down. Like I'm getting in better shape. I'm wearing clothes that actually aren't husky, because like I remember it was really funny in 7th grade when I started getting chubby. I had to wear what was called husky jeans, and so I don't know if they have that in the UK, but husky is code word for fat.
Oh.
But like, yeah. And so anyway, I knew what it meant. And my mom, we're in this department store getting school uniform clothes, and I'm in the husky section, and they'll have these little dogs.
Kind of sounds cool.
Yeah, my mom's
until
like,
you say that.
Yeah, it's got this cool dog on. I was like, Mom, I know what that means. But yeah, so I started running. The weight started coming off, and all of a sudden, like I felt like I was less limited by my body and more enabled by it. And so when the school year started up, I had a friend who was on the cross country team, and he's like, hey, you should try to run cross country. And he like said what the standards were. So it's like, you need to be able to run a 5K in like less than, I think it was like 28 minutes or something like that. And so I'm like, how's that even humanly possible? like how could somebody do that? But, I tried out, and like my first race, I ran it in 27 minutes. So like I just, made the standard, but I was like, wow, I can't believe I did that. And then as I was continuing to go through this process of running cross country, and then I did distance events in track and field, both my junior and senior year, I was an overweight, about 200 pounds when I started this whole thing, and I graduated high school weighing 128 pounds. And I was running about 70 miles a week. My 5K had gotten all the way down to 17:12, running sub 5-minute miles in track. And it just completely transformed. And I learned some very fundamental lessons about how when you apply yourself over a significant time period consistently, and you're genuinely putting in effort along that process, amazing things happen, amazing things change. And then I got tired of being skinny. And so before college, I had a friend who started going to this local gym and working out. And he's like, hey, do you want to come lift weights with me? I'm like, oh, sure. That sounds like it could be fun. Try something new. And the first time I tried lifting a weight, like I tried squatting, because when you're a cross country runner, you're not known for having a lot of strength.
No.
You can run a long way and do it pretty quickly. But when it comes to picking up heavy objects, like that is the opposite of what you've trained your body for. So we put 95 pounds on the bar. So, it's a 45-pound bar, 25-pound plate on each side. I squatted down with it and got stuck, right? Couldn't get back up. And then I looked, and there was this other guy, just some local townsfolk meathead, and he was squatting 225, so 245-pound plates on each side. And before he lifted it, I'm looking at that like, that's not possible. No one could lift that much weight. And he squats it like 4 or 5 reps, and like my mind was just blown. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But sure enough, he did that. I'm like, wow, maybe one day I could lift weights like that. And no one had ever told me anything about drugs, steroids, stuff like that. It was just all belief. And so I had this notion in my head that I wanted to try to play football again. But now I'm done with high school, right? I'm going into college, going to a Division I school. So I'm like, there's this process called walking on. So like if you're not recruited and you're not given a scholarship, you can still do something called walking on to a football team, which is where you'll meet up, work out with the team, and eventually they have tryouts. And when you go through tryouts, you either make the cut or you don't. And if you make the cut, congratulations, you have successfully walked on. And so I just made this decision. I'm going to try to walk onto the football team. And so I started lifting weights, and I started eating. Like, we had a cafeteria at our school, and I made full use of my meal plan. But in my freshman year of college, I went from 128 pounds to 198 pounds, and I got very strong. And my body completely changed and transformed. And just the confidence that's associated with going through that kind of process is life-changing in a positive way. But really going through that journey and seeing what it did for me as a person, taking me from this like little shy kid who hid behind the mask of being this goofy guy so he could fit in, to getting to fully blossom and become who I am as a person and reveal my true personality and have confidence as I walk through life. Like, that was so powerful that I wanted to find some kind of way to share that with others. And so as a school job, I got a certification through NASM to be a personal trainer and started doing personal training at the school gym as a student. So that was my student job, as a personal trainer. And then what I was doing was all my clients, I would kind of help them take those first steps in that journey. And like, I had a client, his name's David VN. He went from a little over 420 pounds. He was my first client, or he was actually my second client, but second client started working within like a week of the first one. So one of my first clients came to me because the doctor said, you're going to die if you don't lose weight. And he told me that. And so no pressure, right? No pressure, kid. Like, here you go. You're diving right into the deep end. But it was also just as incredible seeing him go through his own transformation, because by the time he didn't get a new job and he had to move somewhere, but he had got all the way down to like 280.
Wow.
And so that's a massive transformation. And what was really cool is when we first started working together, all we could do was walk. So we would just go to this little indoor track that went above the basketball courts, and we would just walk laps, and I would talk to him because that was the limitation of his physical ability. But as weight started to come off, like he started to get a little bit better at walking, we go further distances, we would add in things like doing Swiss ball squat. So putting a Swiss exercise ball against the wall, squatting with it for stability, adding in some little dumbbells. Every time we met up, it was like there's a new thing that he was able to do. And so the weight's coming down, the strength's going up, the capabilities are increasing. And he was somebody who was also very shy, not very talkative, very reserved with his personality. But as he got healthier and in better shape, this vibrant, comical guy popped out. that had been in there the whole time. And that's when I really knew like what the calling was when it comes to like why am I here? What's my purpose? Like what am I going to be doing in this world? But it really comes down to helping people, like especially in that context of fitness and health.
It feels like there's something in there as well about manifesting, because you said when you first saw that person lifting those weights, it was like seeing the 4-minute mile. Is that right? The 4-minute mile? The first person to run.
Oh, Roger Bannister.
Yeah, Roger Bannister.
Fellow Brit. Yeah.
Yeah. So Roger Bannister, like, no one thought it was possible. And as soon as he did it, subsequent people did it there straight after him. Like, as if by magic. Like, no one could do it. One person does it, everyone does it. And you were able to see that a few times in your life, where you could see that transformation in yourself. You were able to see the transformation as other people lifting weights. It seemed completely untangible for you, and then you gave the gift not so much of fitness but of manifestation of transformation, it seems.
Yeah, it's belief. And so if you're going to be doing anything, it has to start with that seed of belief. And we were talking about like the Bible and Christianity and theology as we were like leading into all this, and there's a very interesting quote in there, but like again, like I'm kind of new to this in a way, like relearning it. But it was a faith the size of a mustard seed can move a mountain.
Yeah.
Right? And that's just belief. And so, again, when we apply that to our own lives and think about what do we believe, if you're going to do anything and expect to see tangible results from it, you have to have belief that it can work. You have to have that little bit of faith. And so, like, if somebody wants to lose weight, but they don't think that they can do it, well, they're not going to do it. Mm-hmm. But if you want to lose weight and you believe that you're going to be able to, you're going to do what you need to do to make it happen. Mm-hmm. So that's
it. So you felt like that was your calling to help people have that. And so I don't want to bog us down, but and not jump to your company, but what happened in between before you decided to build Avatar?
Right. So going through that process, being a trainer, working with people, exercise is a component of it. Diet is another component of it, probably a bigger one. So especially when it comes to weight loss.
Yeah.
So that being said, at the time, this is like 2008 to 2011, that kind of range. And that was when my first encounter with diet fads started popping up, and there's always going to be new fads. And I'm going to anger plenty of people as I rattle them out. But at the time, paleo was like the big thing that was starting to come around. Well. Atkins had been around like a little bit longer. South Beach was one. You talk about people having a carnivore diet now. Mm-hmm. Like veganism has taken off. Keto had a surge, and there's just all these different protocols to diet that people want to do that are extreme, right? It's like one extreme or another, because the more extreme something is, the more extreme the promises of it are, the better you can market it. And the better that you market something, the more likely people are to be jumping on board with it. But they're missing, or they don't really address a lot of the fundamentals of diet and why diets work in the first place. So I'll give you a good example with keto. When people start doing a keto diet, they're cutting out all carbs, right? And so when you cut out all carbs, you're going to dump the glycogen that's in your body. And so glycogen is just stored carbohydrate energy. And so for every gram of glycogen that you hold in your body, there's 3 grams of water that are bound to that molecule. And so as you burn through your glycogen reserves while in a calorie deficit, while you're on keto, you're going to pee out all that water weight. And so for an average sized guy who's starting keto, that might be anywhere from 6 to 8 pounds. Mm-hmm. And you could lose that in your first week. And so you start thinking, wow, the carbs were making me fat. It's like, no, that wasn't even fat that you lost. It was all just water and glycogen. And so again, you'll continue with that. And there's things about keto that can help with appetite regulation, but there's nothing magic about it. Because again, if you're going to be losing body fat, you can't surpass physics through a diet protocol. At some point, the amount of energy that you're taking into your body has to be less than the energy going out. You can get fat doing keto. I did. Because there is, and again, you have to be a real fitness nerd to even know what I'm about to talk about. But there's this guy named Ziz, right? Okay. Ziz was an internet fitness celebrity, bodybuilding.com, the MISC. But he was a huge keto guy, and he was ripped, right? Everybody wanted to look like Ziz at this time.
Was he the liver king of the time?
He was, yeah, he was the Liver King, but with like EDM and cocaine.
Okay.
Well, more cocaine.
More, just a bit more.
But yeah, so anyway, like Ziz was the man. Like everybody loved him. Everybody who was like in his age demographic, I guess, which I was at the time. We're almost if he was still alive, we'd be almost the exact same age. But he's sadly passed away because he probably did too much cocaine when he was in Thailand at a sauna and had a heart attack. Rest in pieces. We're all gonna make it, bro. That was his thing. But anyway, yeah. So like before going too far down that whole rabbit hole, he was somebody who was always preaching keto, right? And so what he would say is like, oh, when you're doing keto, because your body's using fat as its primary energy source, you can't store fat. And so I'm thinking to myself, I could do a keto bulk. So if I do keto and I can't store fat, and I lift really heavy weight, everything that I put on is going to be muscle, right? And that's what I'm kind of thinking to myself. And this is like the summer of like 2010, I want to say, maybe 2009. It's like 2009 or 2010. And so I'm just having like bacon omelets and peanuts, like double dipped in butter, like, just, probably 7,000 calories a day of grease, right? And so as I'm eating this, my weight is going up, right? And in my head, I'm like, I'm getting jacked, bro. Like I'm getting so big. And what was funny is like I was just getting fat. And so one of my roommates always refers to that, like my friend Jason. He's like, yeah, it's the summer that Mark turned into a refrigerator. And then eventually I was trying to play rugby at the time too. That's when I first gotten into it.
Proper sport.
Yeah, proper sport.
Okay, good.
But guess what? When you're doing keto and trying to play rugby, you're going to cramp. Your performance is going to be terrible because of the type of energy pathways that you're using in a rugby match, which is like a sprint interval sport, are glycolytic. You need to be using glycogen, not ketogenic pathways. And so my performance was terrible. So I just got fat, cramped, and had a bad 7 season. And then I realized maybe Ziz wasn't right about keto. And so, obviously try to learn more about like the nuts and bolts of details of it. And I started enrolling in elective courses in nutrition. And that's when I got introduced to the concept of macros by a nutrition professor who was an agriculture specialist, Dr. Jack Pace. And so Dr. Pace was talking about livestock. He was talking about cattle. And so when you have the USDA, they grade beef. And the grade of the beef is basically like the body fat percentage that the cow had. And so he was talking about how they manipulate the feed of these cattle, like the protein, the fats, the carbs, the macronutrients, in order to change the grade of the beef. And so I asked him, like, could you do that with people? Right? Like, he's like, yeah, of course. Like, it's the same fundamental principles. And so that kind of set me down the path of learning more about like macros. And so like if it fits your macros, IFYM was the term for it at the time. And again, that can be kind of misleading because a lot of people think, oh, how many donuts can I possibly eat? And then just like have water and whey protein. Like, no, that's a terrible way to approach it. But yeah, that's really what it comes down to is like every person on this planet has a specific need when it comes to protein, fat, and carb intake based off what you're trying to do, what your goals are, what your body is like, your body fat percentage, your total lean body mass, level of surplus or deficit that you're aiming for. Like, all these things play into it. But at the end of the day, the beautiful thing about the macros approach to dieting is everybody has their own preferences, right? Some people, you might live in Italy and you like Italian food. You might live in Ethiopia and like Ethiopian food. You might live in the deep south and like gumbo, right? There's different types of foods all over the world that are all composed of protein, fat, and carbs. And so you can get your protein from a gajillion different sources. Same with your carbs, same with your fats. And so you're just figuring out what you already like, what's going to work with your lifestyle, because there's not a person living on this planet that just doesn't like a protein source. You would die because everyone has to eat protein. It's an essential nutrient. Same with fat, same with carbs. Like you have to have all of them. And so you are in your daily life eating some of them from somewhere. And so they just figure out, okay, well, what am I already doing that I need to slightly modify in order to get the correct nutrition for my specific needs? And then once you figure that out, congratulations, you're going to be healthy for the rest of your life.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you learned about that, and is that then what built the app? That's what the fundamental idea of your app was going to be.
Sort of. I mean, there's a few leaps to be made from there, but that was the idea. So there needed to be some kind of system that would figure out what people's macros were, because at the time, you would like the state of the industry was online macro coaches who would crunch numbers by hand to figure out what their clients' macros needed to be, and then they would communicate through email. And if they were sophisticated, they would be keeping up with their clients on like a spreadsheet. But that was it. And none of it was automated. And so I'm thinking to myself, why is this not an algorithm? Like, this could be done more effectively, more quickly, and cheaper if it was done algorithmically. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I approached my original business partner, who had PhD in nutrition. He was an early online macro coach doing the process that was soon to become a dinosaur. So I was like, hey, if you want to be if you want to work with me on this, like, here's this idea. So I sent him a non-disclosure agreement. Like, we went over that, signed it, and then started kind of going back and forth through email to build like the very first version of the algorithm. And I'm not a tech guy, right? Tech is not my background. Wasn't his background either. But I had a friend who I met doing a physique competition of all things, who was a programmer. And so we started talking with him to build like the very basic, it's called a GUI, or like a graphical user interface. So he built a GUI where we could start plugging in test variables and see what kind of macros the system was spitting out. And yeah, like that was like the very, very early days of the company. I mean, it's a long story from there, so I'm not sure how much deeper we want to go into.
Well, it depends what you think's relevant, but because we want to get into like why you started that and why you decided to make it something bigger than just you two sitting in a room building a GUI. And today it's looking like a big success, and a lot of people are using it, and a lot of people have got a lot of results from it. So whatever detail you think is necessary. Yeah. So why did you go beyond the GUI? And decide this was going to be a real business, not just something you were going to throw around?
Yeah, it was the need. It was really the need that was there, because at the time, because keep in mind, like when all this started, this is right after grad school, and I am back in Shreveport, Louisiana. Like, I started working with a company called Camp Gladiator that's actually based in Austin, ironically, because we're here now. But I was running these outdoor fitness camps, and I'd have 20, 30 people per session at these places. And I was going and doing like private personal training at local gyms between that. That was kind of my work. But again, I couldn't facilitate all that through a GUI. What I wanted to be able to do was put each one of those people onto some sort of automated system. The dream was to eventually make it a native application, but we were going to start, there's a pathway to it where we're going to start with a website, right? You would have a website where you could enter in your information. It would store people's data, store people's macros, and then make adjustments on it. That was the very basic function that we needed to make happen. And so my partner lived out in Tampa, Florida, and he introduced us to our third partner, who's a registered dietitian, who is out in Phoenix, Arizona. You actually know her, Katie Coles. And so, again, like, things are starting to come together. Like, we've got this GUI, we're testing it. Now she's adding her expertise as a dietitian to help further refine the algorithm. Because, again, like, when we first brought it to her, it was very rudimentary. And there's so much more that went into it's still getting developed to this day. Like, it's always going to be a work in progress. But yeah, so all that being said, we all wanted to be in one place. So we had a garage sale, right? I'm not exactly making bank as a trainer. Like, I'm paying my bills, but I didn't have, like, I'm not a rich guy. So sold everything. Right, sold my Xbox, all my games, anything that I had that had some material value to it, and came up with about $5,000. Right, so that was the money that I had to my name, and then I put in $5,000. My other partner put in $5,000. We had $10,000, and that's what we used to pay a web company out of Tampa to like build the website. And so, knowing what I know now, $10,000 is not nearly enough to build what we were asking for. And we didn't even know how to word what we were asking for. And so they ended up building us they built us like the front facing part of a website that could kind of do payment processing. And that was it. Like as far as like storing people's data and all that, that was not built. That was not scoped. That was not quoted. We didn't know that we needed that. We just thought that we would tell them to do this and they were nerds and they would make it happen. Right? Oh, the things you learn as you walk through the tech world.
Yeah.
But yeah, so again, sold everything that I had. You know, we packed up, we moved to Tampa. Like it was so hard even to like get an apartment to sign off on the lease because neither of us had like relevant like
real
pay
jobs.
stubs. Yeah, pay stubs.
Yeah.
I was like, you know, we're building a business, and they're like, we're not going to rent to you at discount apartments plus. But yeah, it's funny how things change. But anyway, like we'll talk more about like the last laughs and all that later. But yeah, so anyway, like we pack up, we move out there. We finally found a place, little tiny 1-bedroom. Somebody got murdered outside of it within like 2 months of us living there. Another story for another day. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we were. And I had a lot of interviews lined up because the whole idea was I'm going to get a regular job out here in Tampa and then work on this startup business idea on the side. And probably applied at no less than 80, 90 different places, got called in for interviews at a couple dozen of them, made it to the final round of interviews on like anywhere from 3 to 5 of them, and all those they ended up going with another candidate. That was pretty crushing. And at the time, like credit card debt's piling up because like you got to eat, you got to pay your rent, and so just kind of going into debt and like, this thing is not really working out great. And so I panic. Took a job, like any job, to slow the bleeding financially. And it was with this cheesy little gym called UFit. And that was out in like Brandon, Florida, which is like a suburb of Tampa. And so I'm there. It's basically a minimum wage job, but you get like a little bit of sales commission if you're selling personal training sessions. And they had this whole skeezy system set up where you're trying to like use Jedi mind control to manipulate people into buying stuff that they probably
NLP.
can't afford.
Like NLP sort of stuff.
Yeah. I don't remember. Like, I tried to flush all of it from my head.
Oh my
But
gosh.
so what I ended up doing was, like, I never used the system the way that they wanted me to. So I had an hour with like every time a new member. Like my job was to like sell them personal training. But what I would do is I would take them out onto the floor and I would show them in 1 hour as best I could how to use equipment, talk about their goals, and set them on a right path. And what was hilarious is I had the best sales in the company because what I was doing was I was actually demonstrating real value and helping and taking care of that person, whether or not they were going to buy training. But I was setting them up to succeed. And so it was really funny because like the manager would get mad because I wasn't doing all the bureaucratic BS that they wanted me to do, but they couldn't get that mad because I had numbers.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of like a little funny aside thing. But yeah, so Katie, she ended up getting a job at this nursing home, another place called Plant City. That was a little bit further out. And it's a good thing she got that job when she did, because that's right when I got fired. So another story, like I basically ended up taking on the director's job because she went out of the country for like a month. And so I'm doing like 3 different things, working ridiculous amounts of overtime, but they had a company policy not to pay overtime. And so they tried to get me to like sign off that I didn't work the hours that I worked. And I wasn't going to do it. And like I said some spicy words, which they wrote down on like the reason for me being unhireable in the future, including F you fit. But yeah, I got paid, I got paid my overtime, which they legally owed to me. And then that was that. But then she ended up taking this job at this nursing home. And so while she's at the nursing home, I would drive her, drop her off there, and then I would find Wi-Fi anywhere I could, whether it was like, camping outside of a Wawa or a Starbucks or going to the public library or this place called the Crazy Cup, which was my favorite place to go to, a little coffee shop, super nice people. Shout out to the Crazy Cup if they're still in business. I hope they are. But yeah, so I was ghostwriting for the website, creating content for it. And this is all pre-launch, right? So like all this is going into it. We're trying to, because again, like the first version that this web design company came up with was like nowhere near where it needed to be. And so it's like, we got to come up with more money. And at that time, like I'm already in debt. So we're just trying to cobble everything together. But eventually we get to a point where it's like, it seems like it's ready to launch. And it didn't have a back end. But I didn't know what a back end was. No. But anyway, so we hit the point where it launches, and like our first partner, he's very well known. He's been like on Joe Rogan, well known in the industry guy. He's not a partner anymore, which is why I'm trying to keep this political, like not start mess guy. Anyway, so we launched, right, and because he's got a pretty big name, there are a lot of people signing up. Yeah. And so you had a lot of people coming on board to the app, or not the app, but like signing up for the website, to the point where it flagged us. We banked through Chase, flagged us as fraud, right? Because they didn't believe that many transactions were legitimately happening. So they froze our bank account, and they froze our ability to make transactions. So we're trying to solve that. At the same time, everything's crashing. Like the website's breaking because there's no back end. And all these, probably anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 people had signed up within like the first couple days, and everything broke, right? So they're all mad. Now, what the part of the website that did work was the contact form. And so emails are just coming in like as fast as you can open them, and they're all mad. And so what was interesting, this is a hugely important lesson that was learned right from the beginning, was all these people had a goal or an idea or a vision of what they wanted for themselves using this service and using this website. And people are used to bad customer support, and they weren't expecting a human to reply to their angry email quickly and in a helpful manner and try to make things right. And so what ended up happening was these people that were mad all of a sudden became understanding. And then what we did was, or what I
you
did
can build evangelists out of that for sure.
Oh yeah, but each one of those people was plugging their numbers into the GUI, right? This old GUI that we started with to figure out what their macros were, and then communicating with them all through email, but just at an unbelievable scale. So probably being up for like 20 hours a day for a few weeks, just constantly burning the candle at both ends, while at the same time we found freelance developers to come figure this out, because we weren't going to do another scope of this company. Because anytime you're working with a firm, like they're going to scope out projects, they're going to give you a project manager. It's a slow process. Like we needed speed. So we found a full stack web dev who was like, oh, you don't have a back end. We need to build that. And so started building it. And like, as we're building and go, like people are paying us, it's $10 a month. So we actually have cash flow. And now we can pay that dev in order to build what needed to be there. And so he started to put out fires and build things that should have been there in the first place, and spin up things we were like running on our own servers. Like we weren't on AWS when we started. Like we were on private servers. So the site's coming together. It's starting to function. And as we're working with people have requests, features they would like to see. So they're asking for things. There's new ideas. And over time, we're like, we need to hire more dev help. So we hire more developers freelance, and they start coming on, they're working together, and just the system is constantly morphing and growing and evolving and doing a better job to serve customer needs. And again, just like we're probably talking like post site launch, we're in month 2 or 3 where I'm kind of explaining where we're at right now. But we're now like 10 years into business. So there's been a lot that's happened since
I say
then
this
and now.
all the time. Is the 10
I know it's already a long story at this point.
It's a 10-year overnight success.
Yeah, exactly. Right? It's like it's amazing how many years of hard work it takes to become an overnight success.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's a trope that's beaten to death, but it's so true. But I can tell you now that in this time, we've worked with in excess 250,000 individual customers. Their combined weight loss is over 3 million pounds. I mean, these people come from every walk of life you can imagine. We had a good chunk of the WWE using the app because our growth has always been word of mouth.
Yeah.
And that's like we are.
It's still to this day.
Still to this day, like we have never been good at marketing. Like that's just not what we do. Like we are product focused. Right.
Yeah.
So we make a really good service, really good app, and we take really good care of our customers. And then I could go on another rant about marketing and some discoveries that have been made about bot traffic that people pay for and why you're generally not going to get any kind of ROI unless you're already like a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah. And have you found competitors have entered the market more?
Oh, yeah. If you have a good idea, people are going to rip it off. Right. I'm proud to say that like we're the first on earth to do what we do. But now there's dozens of other things that are like, oh yeah, we're the world's best first macro thing. I'm like, you came out in 2022. It's like, okay, these claims are misleading, but
your logo needs to be established, 2010 or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. But again, at the end of the day, I believe in God. I believe God's gonna give you everything that you need.
Okay.
And so that's just a core foundational thing. And so when no one's ever gonna have 100% of the market, right? I'm a competitive person. I want to do well, but I also don't want to let my own ego get in the way of somebody saving their life through tracking macros and reversing diabetes or just doing whatever. So if I have competitors and they are putting really good products out there that help people, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And you know what else? That drives me to make what we have even better. And so it's going to be more helpful.
People think competitors are a bad thing. I've helped people build apps in the past, and they've said, "Oh, I don't think we should do it. There's 2 or 3 people doing it." It's like, no, that's a sign that there's a market.
Right.
Now you need to find your moat, your defensible things, what you're going to do differently and better. But that's a good sign.
Yeah, it's iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of really cool stuff that we're doing right now that I'm not going to say publicly. Because, why tip your hand before you put it out there? But, we are in a very good place. I can't say how thankful I am. I mean, 2020 to 2023 was considered a mass extinction event for startups. Mm-hmm. And guess what? We're still going, baby.
I know, right? No, that's the thing. You didn't overextend yourself. You've built a company that's actually it's not built upon sand.
Right, and it's not built on debt.
Yeah.
Right, it's built on cash flow and customers. We've never had investors, ever. And that's something that I'm pretty proud of because I had no idea. I didn't know what a startup company was when I started my startup company. Didn't even know the word. I didn't know what a seed round was. I was like, it's a seed round when you plant your crops in a circle. But it's like you learn these things as you go, and it's very interesting because here we are in the heart of Austin, which is the heart of tech startup world, probably not just in America, but maybe the entire planet at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's shifted from San Francisco to here now, I find.
Yeah, it really has, and it's amazing seeing all the different ways that people approach it. But you also have to understand that models shift and models change, and what worked 10 years ago is not necessarily going to work today. But yeah, ultimately, and this is just Mark's theory of business, if you can get somebody to pay you money for something and they're happy, you can probably get somebody else to do the same thing and be happy. And so if you can prove with a minimum viable product that you can get a customer and take care of them, well, you can probably find a way to cash flow. And so I'm not saying that it's bad to take out a loan. I'm not saying that it's bad to have an angel investor or work with venture capital or whatever. But ultimately, you have companies that are grow now, monetize later.
Yeah. Or grow at all costs.
Yeah, you grow at all costs. Maybe once upon a time that worked, and the percentage of people who grow at all costs that wind up having customers at some point is pretty small.
Yeah, and as soon as we had this bubble burst and startups just start dying last year and the year before, what did investors want to invest in? Profitable companies.
Yep, profitable customers that have positive cash flow. They have customers. They don't have debt, and they can demonstrate growth.
Yeah.
It's so simple. I mean, if you can demonstrate 15% growth year over year, and you have any inclination of even selling your business at some point, that's kind of what people look for. It's a baseline.
Yeah.
So that's. Yeah, it's interesting because we've hit the point where there are companies that have floated that question out to us. And again, if we're ever going to go through it, it has to be the right fit because at the end of the day, we're not just doing this to make a bunch of money. Yeah, that's happened and that's great. But, we really go down some rabbit holes. Money's not even money. It's currency that we're talking about. Right, so why am I going to trade my thing that has inherent value for a big pile of currency that's just depreciating?
And has your opinion changed a bit on this because you've just had a kid?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it makes you think more about it, right? The stakes are higher. I got married 2 years ago, had my kid 7 weeks ago, and you do start to look at things differently in that context. But you become a little more risk averse. But again, like every time you step out of your door, you're taking a risk. And so you just have to be smarter with the decisions that you make.
So the risk adverse thing to you though, is that made you want to like exit a company more or keep the status quo and keep a company? Keep more.
Keep right now. Yeah.
And the other things we were talking about before we started recording is has that impact having kids and maybe getting married? Has that been this impetus to sort of revamp your spiritual journey again?
Yeah, that was probably, I want to say the only reason why, but that was a very big reason because just understanding that like, okay, who am I as a man, right? Who am I as a father? What do I need to equip myself with everything possible because like I've been entrusted with this young life. And so here we are.
How me and you bonded was probably like doomsday prepping conversations.
Yeah.
About how a man should operate.
We're on the same wavelength.
Yeah. But now it's nice to see that you've like, seen that other side of what it is to be a man and what it is to, to know God as well.
Yeah. And that's a huge part of it. I mean, just think about it. Like what are we? Like, are we, do we live in a materialistic universe? I'm not talking like I'm a Barbie girl kind of materialism, but I'm talking it's like everything that we see around is just a byproduct of like the programs of physics running. It's like gravity causes mass to coalesce and form, and just all these different chemical processes run, electromagnetism and bing, bang, boom, life, free will. Yeah, that doesn't really make a ton of sense to me. And if you actually start digging into the science, like not the trademarked science, I'm talking like actual science, talk to some physicists who do it as their day job. And it's fascinating. And like, I want to get my brother to go on podcast. I want to get him to go, like Lex Friedman would be a great guy for him to talk to. Matt Doyle would be a great guy for him to talk to,
Matt Doyle, Lex Friedman.
The titans of this space.
The Titans of Austin podcasts.
Right. But yeah, so my brother, he's a PhD physicist. Like, this is the work that he does. And we were having a conversation where he said, when you drink from the cup of science, you're an atheist. And when you get to the bottom, you see God. Wow. And he's like, and any scientist who's worth their salt will tell you the same thing. And so just like a super condensed thing that I'm getting him to write an essay about, like in like gory technical detail. And I told him, like, don't write this for the layman. I'll handle that, right? Give me the hard
Your brother's
math.
A quantum physicist.
Correct. Yep. And so he said, anytime that you're observing a quantum event, it alters the outcome, right? That's just one of the basic fundamentals of quantum mechanics and observation. And so every time that you are observing an event, there's always observation of the observer observing the observation, altering it. And so you extend that layers and layers and layers up through all of reality itself, and eventually you get to a point for their equations to function correctly that our modern technology that we use every day uses to work, because if the equations weren't true, the stuff that we're using just wouldn't function. But going all the way up, you have an external observer of all reality itself, right? And that's not nothing. You can call that God. And so it's really funny, like in the world of science, right? Like we're an evidence-based nutrition company. So you see a lot of people who are in that world of everything being evidence-based that champion atheism, when in reality, the evidence points to God. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that everyone should think about and ponder deeply.
You said to me before we started recording that you grew up in a Baptist church.
Yep.
Right. And so that kind of, there was, church hurts people all the time, right? But it kind of put you off. But it seems like your brother, is he older than you, younger than you?
He's 5 years older.
He's 5 years older. So he sort of stayed with God or found God through science by the sound of it. And now you're having this rebirth of it. And how's that going to affect how you start leading your life and raising your child? Building a business differently now with that new understanding?
That is an excellent question, Matt. So, but really, I think the best way to answer it is staying spiritually tuned in, right? Prayer. It's like prayer is something that I started incorporating. I try to pray at least twice a day. So every morning when I wake up, every night when I go to bed, right? And the prayer is just is like an expression of gratitude, right? And it's a request for wisdom, because I think that anything that we try to build and accomplish and do in this world, you need wisdom to pull it off. That's like one of the most valuable things that you can have. And like so I remember this from my Baptist church, but there's like the old story of Solomon, and like God said, Solomon, you can have anything that you want. And he asked for wisdom, which was like the wisest answer that you could give. So it's like, there's a reason why, like, even if you want to look at something like the Bible, it's just like an old story. Well, there's a reason why it's stuck around, because it's timeless. Like, it's timeless lessons, timeless wisdom. Now, I personally believe that it's a lot more than that, but that belief didn't really start kicking up until just a few months ago.
That's great.
Yeah. And it was very interesting because, again, like, my experience growing up in like a Baptist setting was really a disservice to the words that I read starting a few months ago. And that's what I did. I just cracked a Bible open, probably first time in like 15 years. And I was just like, went to the Gospels and started reading through it. And I'm like, this is nothing like what I remember. Like the depth of the lessons, the depths of the truth within it was just mind blowing. And there's been other experiences I've had that I'm not, we were kind of talking about before, that sort of reinforces this. But like, there comes a point when you live enough life and you experience enough things firsthand that you just can't ignore. There's been things that they just don't make any sense when you think about a traditional view, like the deterministic model of the universe. I mean, it's like, no, I guess we can go deep. Why be anything but honest? I had a cousin who struggled with brain cancer all throughout her childhood, and she would go into remission. It would come back. She would go into remission again, and it was always like this thing. And she was a few years older than me. I think probably she was about my brother's age, about 5 years older. And then this is when I was in high school. One night I go to bed, and like, we hadn't heard any updates from her in a while. So usually, like, no news is good news on that front. But one night I go to bed. I have a dream, and she comes to me in this dream and tells me not to be sad and not to worry about anything, and that everything's okay. And so the next morning I woke up, and before I go to school, my dad's like, "Hey, Mark, need to tell you something." And I'm like, it's about Rachel, isn't it? He's like, "Yeah, she passed away last night."
Wow.
And like, I don't, tell me what that is, right?
Yeah.
And there's been a few other things in my life that have been similar to that, where it just, you can't align it with the nuts and bolts view of the universe.
Yeah.
So that spiritual light and energy and questioning state of being within my mind has been there for a while. I mean, it kind of got put on the back burner because, a lot of times life can like get in the way, and you can be distracted by...
The world gets in the way.
Yeah, the world gets in the way, and you can get distracted and really forget about like the deeper truths of being. But then things happen that remind you, or they kind of like reinforce the importance of like the deeper levels of reality. And so a big one for me was like when my wife is 9 months pregnant, and I put my hand on her belly and feel that little foot kicking. I'm just like, whoo, oh, wow. Okay, here we go. And then, she gives birth. We're at the hospital, and they flop that little baby down on my chest, and I'm looking into her eyes, and she's looking back at me. I'm like, this is what matters right here.
Yeah.
And, taking care of her. And then, something that I read in the Bible was like, it was one of the teachings of Jesus, and he's talking to some, the Pharisees, and like, as they always like, the Pharisees are always trying to like get him in a gotcha moment, and they always end up getting got. It's pretty funny, like the way they go back and forth. But, they were asking Jesus, like, what are the greatest commandments? Right? Mm-hmm. Thinking that it's going to be like in reference to the 10 commandments that everybody knows. But that's not the answer that he gave. So the answer that Jesus gave was the greatest commandments are to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. It's like, oh, okay. And so then you kind of start to think to yourself, wow, what if everybody in this world like followed that? What a great place this would be to live in. But again, like what we do as a business, if you really think about it, it is an expression of love, because having personally gone through all the experiences that I went through life, struggling with weight and confidence and all that other stuff, like that's terrible. And if somebody had given me the opportunity to plug into a system like we've got, what a positive thing that would be. And so we're working on things right now that, again, change lives for the better. Like, 3 million pounds of body fat being taken off of people is a massive positive in the world. But we also have things that we're working on that are going to help people like save money on their grocery bills. And so if you pay any attention to economic news, right? I'm not talking like MSNBC or Fox Business. I'm talking like, you're looking at statements from the Fed, and you're looking at yield curves, or you look at things like housing affordability index, et cetera. Times are tough. And there are plenty of things that could make them a lot tougher. But yeah, so if we know what people are eating, we know what they need to eat, we can help them find ways to spend less money fulfilling their needs. And so that's something that's going to be big that Avatar is doing, is going to be a grocery budgeting tool. And so people can actually use the app, be healthier, and save money on their grocery bill. And that's coming out probably in like 3 months.
Look, I've got the pleasure to know you over these last few years, and it's amazing to see what you've achieved with the business and with your life, and now with your family. Because before, when I met you, you were single, I think, still.
Yeah.
And now that you have God in your life, there's another little quote here. And if He's with you, who can stand against you? So what is ahead of you and Avatar? I'm more excited about it than all the stuff I've already learned about you, because I think there's even bigger things ahead now with this new insight that you've got.
Oh yeah, and you can't ask for a better mentor than the progenitor of all reality
to give you some wisdom.
Yeah, exactly. But ultimately, everybody has a choice. Like, we all have free will, and so like if you want to just try to like strike out and ignore like that deep voice within your soul and say like, I'm king of my own universe and rock with that, like you're given that choice. But see how that's worked out for people. Like it really is amazing when you just start to kind of look at people's lives. Because like I've known people who were very, very materially successful, but they had no God in their life other than themselves. Mm-hmm. And they usually, it's not all the time, but usually they try to find some form of like escapism from their own mind. And it typically winds up eventually becoming self-destructive. And so like what they had goes away, right? Like whatever material success they had goes away. A lot of these guys kill themselves. And, like at the end of the day, like this is, sometimes you have shower thoughts, and that might be all it is. Maybe it's coming from like a spiritual connection. I don't know. But one thing that I realized is like everything that you have will be stripped away. Your health, your looks, your money, your resources. Like when they lay you down on the ground, you don't take anything with you, right? Everything you have will be stripped away from you at some point. And so when you keep that at the top of your mind, it shifts what you view as important. Because again, like if you understand that, that all the material things of this world are ultimately going to be taken from you, what's left? It's what you really are. It's your soul, it's your spirit, and that's what you need to focus on, right? And just understand that, it's like as human beings, we're fallible, we make mistakes. That's that's part of the deal of existing. Yeah. But when you reach out to God and be like, hey, thanks for making me, help me to understand like why I'm here, how to navigate and how to grow closer to you.
Yeah.
And so when you live that way and then like try to help your family live that way, try to help your friends live that way, and just really support each other, you notice some pretty powerful changes start to happen. And again, like this is another cool thing. Like I've had the privilege of knowing, multiple billionaires, like people who have just been materially as successful as you can get. Some of them are Christian, some of them are not. But people at the end of their life, there's a study done, and the study was told to me by some guys that run like an investment company for people who have exited startups. So like talk to them, been picking their brains. But they said that people at the end of their life, they did these studies, would tell you that the most important things are the relationships that you have with family and friends, the relationship that you have with God, living a life that was in tune with some type of purpose, and then doing the best to take care of your physical health. Like those are the 4 things that always show up as the most important. And it wasn't, I was on the cover of Forbes. How many commas did I have in my bank account? None of them. And these are very successful people who are like at the end of their life that they're interviewing. 0 would say that the important things were the material. And so I think that's a pretty cool thing to think about. And it's like, yes, to whom much is given, much more will be expected.
And that's what's exciting about this chapter for you, man. Is like you've got those things you just listed, and family and purpose. You've got purpose in your company, you've got your family, and now you've got a God to do it with. So
yeah, feels like living.
Man, thanks for spending this time with me. I'm going to have to go wrap this up and come and hug you. So thanks for your time.
Bring it in, Matt. Bring it in.